Bonjour, hi. Welcome back to another coffee talk. For those of you who are not familiar with coffee talks, it's a series I have on this channel where every Friday I sit down with a cup of coffee, I sip on it while I talk about different topics that have been on my mind for the past week, and this week is no exception. I really liked using that microphone last week, so I'm going to be using it from now on for coffee talks. But I didn't want to put it on my shirt today. I wanted to hold it, so that's what we're going for. My fiddle leaf fig is officially dead. She's dead. However, today I am not talking about the long coming death of my fiddle leaf fig, but I'm talking about limits and establishing them and establishing your boundaries. That was a long subject, so let's just say boundaries. I would consider myself someone I thought I was someone who was pretty good with establishing my own boundaries and my own limits until I did some introspection. This is always where the magic happens. And I realized I was good at establishing my limits in certain spheres of my life, and not all of them. So for example, I won't have any difficulty saying to someone I don't want to hang out with them, or that I am tired, or how I feel, for example, and I won't necessarily, I wouldn't consider myself a people pleaser. And usually this is what happens with people who have a hard time establishing their own boundaries and their own limits. It's because they are people pleasers and they don't want to disappoint and they want to please everyone. And it's not the case for me. However, I do have a harder time to establish my own limits and boundaries when it comes to work and when it comes to romantic relationships. And it's funny because for friendships, as I said, I'm like really okay with the fact of speaking my mind and telling things the way that they are and not really being afraid of hurting someone or of telling the truth. But when it comes to romantic relationships and when it comes to dating, I do have trouble saying whenever I'm not into someone or when I'm actually into them. And I've had a hard time before saying no to things that I didn't want to do. And yeah, it's just so weird how in my head I feel so confident. I'm like, I don't mind telling people the truth. But then when it comes to it for specific events or in specific environments or context, it does not apply anymore. And I would say that part of me kind of takes pride into, oh, there's a spider. Oh God. Okay, let's carry on. So as I was saying, I take pride in actually being able to set my own boundaries and to have them respected, because that's the most important part. Yes, you do put your limits and you set your boundaries, but if people don't respect them, this is where the trouble is at. This is where there's an issue. And I think that part of it really plays into how well you set your own boundaries and how you have them being respected, because it's one thing to say, oh, no, but then actually doing it. And this is when people take you for granted. And this is when people start to disrespect your boundaries and your limits, and they start pushing your own limits because they want to see, well, if she said no, but she actually did it, she might... The spider's moving. Fuck. Sorry, I'm feeling very distracted today, especially when it comes to insects. Okay, anyway, so yeah, not only is it important to actually sit down and have a talk with yourself and be like, okay, what are my boundaries for X, Y, Z, and actually apply them and actually have them being respected. Because as I said, otherwise people are going to take you for granted. They're going to take advantage of you. They're going to take advantage of your generosity, frankly. This is what happens. Because most times, and here I'm going to speak for myself, but from also what I've noticed around me, most times when you go off your own limits, it's not necessarily out of disrespect for yourself, but it's mostly out of wanting to help a friend or wanting to make them happy or not wanting to disappoint them. And that's okay. But you also have to ask yourself, why are you doing this? Like, if you're setting boundaries for yourself, if you're setting limits and you cannot even respect them yourself, then what message does that send you? And I know that it can be pretty scary to say just no to a friend, to a significant other, to a boss even, but you are allowed to say no, and you are allowed to have limits and boundaries and have them respected. And I'm not talking about being cocky or being obnoxious or whatever. I'm just saying that, like, realistically, there are things you can do and there are things that you cannot do, and that is okay. And wanting to please, it's normal, but it's just probably most times it's going to put you in a position where at the end you're going to be even more uncomfortable than if you would have said no in the first place. So, for example, if your boss asks you to do a certain task that you've never done before and you don't quite know how to do it, or you don't have the time to do it, my reflex would be to just say yes, because in that case, in that scenario, I would be a yes man. I would be a yes woman. I would say yes just because I wouldn't want to disappoint, and I just would want to prove that I can do it, and I would want to prove to others that I'm good and that I'm capable of doing things and I'm able to accomplish a mission. But most times when that has happened in the past, it just came back to bite me in the ass in the end, because either I was not able to deliver on time or I was not able to deliver, period. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure everybody has once said yes to something that they didn't want to do or that they didn't feel like they could actually do. And I guess it's lesson learned. I guess it's the hard way to learn in life, by actually doing things and failing. And don't get me wrong, sometimes ego and pride do want to take on a challenge, and that's totally fair. And sometimes that has happened to me, and I've actually been impressed with myself because I was able to take on a challenge and complete it adequately. But there's a difference between accepting a challenge and going off your limit and pushing your boundaries. I said what I said. In my opinion, a lot of it comes from wisdom, from aging, from experiencing life, and from knowing who you are and what you want and what you don't want. Because if I take a look back at, let's say, 20-year-old Shania, she was so bad at respecting her own limits and setting herself some boundaries for her to respect, but for also other people to respect. And that's because she was just so all over the place, and she was trying to prove a point, and she was trying to prove to everybody that she was so cool, and she would say yes to anything and she would do anything. But looking back at it now, I don't feel very proud of certain decisions I've made. I don't feel very proud of certain things I've done or certain things I've said in the past just because I wanted to please or just because I wanted to, I don't know, prove a point. But as I said, sometimes you gotta learn the hard way. And now I'm way better. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I'm better at establishing my boundaries, having limits, respect them myself, and having others respect them as well. And it can be pretty scary at first, but the more you say no to things, the more you're going to get used to it. And trust me when I say that. The more you say no, the more you are going to be accustomed to it, and the more you're going to enjoy it, to be quite frank. Don't become antisocial and don't say no to everything. But, sometimes you just have to take like a few seconds and really think it through. You don't have to justify yourself. Sometimes you could just say like, oh, I'll get back to you shortly. Like I'll look into it and I'll get back to you. And just sometimes taking like a step back allows you to really think it through and to really ask yourself, can I do this? Do I want to do this? Whether that's like work related, family related, friends related, romantical, that's not a word. You get the point. And honestly, nobody should judge you or should resent you for saying no to something. If anything, they should understand. It might make them angry or disappointed at first, but they should understand. And if they don't, I hate to break it to you, but maybe they shouldn't be in your life anymore. Because respect works in both ways. It's a bi-directional thing. You can't just respect someone and not have them respect you back. Like it has to be mutual. And the more respect you give, the more you get. Or the more, yeah. The more you get, the more you give. Anyway, it goes both ways in my opinion. So if I could give you a little piece of advice today, it would be to say no to things you don't want to do. Not just for fun, but actually, if there are things you don't want to do, if you're not available, if you just don't feel like it, just say no. And be frank about it. Just be honest. Don't try and like make a fuss out of it, or I don't even know if that's a thing, but don't try and hide the truth or like make it sound nicer than it is. If you don't feel like it, you don't feel like it. You're human. It's normal. And honestly, it can be very scary, but as I said, people will understand. Like they can't, if you don't want to do something, they can't make you do it. And if they do, that's a felony. Like that's criminal. And I guess that what I've been saying applies a lot to like relationships and friendships and family and whatnot. But you can also apply it to your work life. Again, if you're being realistic, polite, and you don't step out of line, there's a way to say things, and there's a way to just have a conversation with your boss or with your co-workers about whatever project you're working on. If you need help, just say so. If you can't do it, just say so. And there's always a way around things. They're not going to fire you because you're too busy working on other projects. And if anything, it can just give maybe a little insight to whoever you're working with as to what you can and cannot do. And I do believe in transparency. I think transparency is the key in any professional relationship. The more honest you are, the better the working relationship will be, the better the collaboration will be. It's not, don't lie about shit. Just don't lie in general, but especially in a working context. But I'm getting off the track right here, so so I guess I'm going to finish off by reminding everyone that it's okay to have limits and set boundaries for yourself, and not only respect them yourself, but also have them respected. And if there are people who are not willing to respect your limits and your boundaries, you should get rid of them. Cheers to that. On that note, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting me. I truly, 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 truly mean it. Hopefully I have made a little difference in your day today. If you would like to make a difference in mine, you know what to do. And I'm going to wish you in bonne journée.